Hey, welcome. So today we're diving into a story that is just, well, epic. It's all about quests. Quests for land, for power, for survival. We're talking invasions, betrayals, and believe it or not, the birth of the very language I'm speaking right now. We're going to trace the overlapping, often brutal, quests for the piece of land that would one day be called England. So let's just start with this question right here. Imagine a massive empire controls a piece of land for centuries. They build roads, cities, they bring order, and then, poof, they just pack up and leave. What happens next? What happens to that prize they just left behind? Well, that's exactly where our story kicks off, in the chaos and the power vacuum of ancient Britain. Think of this as our roadmap for today. It all starts with the Romans, right? Then they leave, and that chaos opens the door for the Anglo-Saxons. But their quest isn't easy, because then they have to face the Vikings. And it all builds to this one final explosive showdown in 1066 with the Normans. Each group had their own quest, their own reason for being there. Let's get into it. All right, so let's set the scene. For almost 400 years, Britain was basically Britannia, a province of the Roman Empire. And yeah, the Romans brought all their usual stuff: roads, buildings, laws, and of course, their language, Latin. But for the regular folks living there, Latin was the language of the powerful, not the language of the home. But here's the thing about empires: they don't last forever. Back in the 5th century, Rome itself was in deep trouble. So the legions stationed in Britain got the call. Hey, we need you back home, now. And just like that, they were gone. They left the island completely on its own, totally vulnerable and politically shattered. And you know, that Roman quest, it still echoes in the words we use every single day. Get this, a whopping 27% of modern English words come straight from Latin. But think about what kind of words they are. They're often the big, formal, academic ones. The language of the heart, the words you use at home. Well, that came from somebody else entirely. So with the Romans out of the picture, the original inhabitants, the Britons and Gales, had a huge problem. They were getting hammered by raids from the north, from tribes called the Picts and the Scots. They were desperate, and that desperation kicked off their own quest, a quest for protection. Okay, so let's get our players straight. On one side, you've got the native Britons. They're Christian and they're just trying to survive. On the other side, you have the Anglo-Saxons. They're a mix of Germanic tribes, pagan, tough, and they're on a quest of their own, looking for new land to settle. Two very different groups with two very different goals. So the Britons made a decision that would change history forever. They invited these fierce Anglo-Saxon warriors over from what's now Germany and Denmark to work as mercenaries. The deal was simple. You fight off the Picts and Scots for us, and we'll give you land and pay you. Seemed like a pretty straightforward business deal, right? Or so they thought. And this is the exact moment where the entire story pivots. That initial quest for protection, it's about to morph into a full-blown quest for conquest. Now, at first, the plan actually worked great. I mean, the Anglo-Saxon mercenaries were incredible fighters. They did exactly what they were hired to do. They beat back the northern tribes, and it really looked like the Britons had made the right call. And here is the twist you could see coming a mile away. The Anglo-Saxons looked around at these lush green lands of Britain and thought, you know what? This place is pretty nice. They saw a weak, divided country, and their whole quest changed. They went from being hired help to being the new landlords, from protectors to invaders. And they totally succeeded. They pushed the native Britons to the edges of the island, to what we now know as Wales, Cornwall, and Scotland, and they started settling down. They named their new home Angland, the land of the Angles. And of course, over time, England became England. But this new England wasn't one big happy family. Oh no, it was a chaotic patchwork of 7 warring kingdoms called the Heptarchy, all fighting each other for control. But out of all that mess, one kingdom slowly started to rise to the top, Wessex, down in the south. And the powerhouse kingdom of Wessex gave us maybe the most famous Anglo-Saxon king of all time, Alfred the Great. This guy was more than just a warrior. He was a scholar, a leader, someone who really fought to create a unified English identity in the face of incredible threats. So, how do we even know all these stories? Well, a huge part of the answer is this person, the Scop. In a time before most people could read or write, the Scop was like the living hard drive of the tribe. They were the entertainers, the historians, the ones who sang the epic poems, and made sure the quests of their heroes were never, ever forgotten. And the way they used language was just beautiful. They loved these poetic little riddles called gennings. They wouldn't just say the sea. No, that was the whale road. A person's body wasn't just a body, it was their bone house. It's just such a creative, metaphorical way of seeing the world. So, just as the Anglo-Saxons were starting to get their act together and build this new nation, a brand new threat appeared. Around the year 787, a terrifying new quest began, launched from the sea, bringing what the old chronicles called the fury of the Northmen. Yup, the Vikings. Their first quest was simple and brutal. They were here for plunder, but they weren't just smash-and-grab raiders. Just like the Anglo-Saxons before them, their quest evolved. They started to stay, to settle, and they eventually conquered a huge chunk of England that became known as the Danelaw. Their reputation for cruelty was absolutely legendary, and it was symbolized by this one horrific execution method, the blood eagle. It's a truly chilling symbol of the terror they brought, and it represented the single greatest threat that King Alfred and his New England had ever faced. So for centuries, it was this back-and-forth struggle between the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings. But the era of both was about to slam to a sudden, violent end. In 1066, one last, final quest for the English crown was launched. And this time, it came from France. And it all went down in a single, fateful year. William, the Duke of Normandy, said the English throne was his, and he invaded to take it. At the legendary Battle of Hastings, he defeated the last Anglo-Saxon king, Harold Godwinson. And just like that, it was over. The Anglo-Saxon quest for England had failed. A new French-speaking ruling class was now in charge. So, that's it then. The Anglo-Saxons lost. Their kingdom was gone, their culture was suppressed. Their quest had failed, or had it? Let's talk about their final and maybe their most powerful legacy. You see, even though the new bosses spoke French, the common people on the ground kept right on speaking their own language, Old English. And yeah, it absorbed thousands of French and Latin words over the centuries, but that Anglo-Saxon foundation, it held strong. The very core of our everyday language, basic words like house, woman, loaf, and that's all them. That's their direct gift to us. Which leaves us with this one last thought to chew on. The Anglo-Saxons lost the crown, they lost the land, they lost all the power. But their language? It didn't just survive, it thrived, it grew, and it eventually spread all over the entire globe. So you just have to wonder, was their violent quest for England just the first chapter in a much bigger, unintended quest, the conquest of the world by the English language itself?